today's service will be a little bit different. There'll be quite a bit of movement. Everything we do is optional, so you don't have to do any of these things. But instead of giving you one long sermon, what we're going to do is that I'm going to speak maybe 5 minutes at a time, interspersed with some song and a way to respond. So if this is your normal nap time, sorry, that might get disrupted just a little bit. I'm not offended if you sleep, just know that. If my gift to you is good rest, then I'm happy to do that. So if you're visiting, I want to say welcome. Glad that you're here. This is for you, and we're glad that you're a guest today. One of the ancient traditions around the resurrection is that Christians would greet each other by saying, "He is risen," and the response is, "He is risen indeed." And so I want to practice that this morning. So I'm going to say, "He is risen," and you'll respond with, "He is risen indeed." He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
That's for you, Megumi. All right, so if you can pull out your stones. These are sacred stones from Home Depot. I watched them myself. But if you can pull out your stone and just feel it in your hand, take a look at it, notice the inconsistencies. Hopefully it's not dirty. I want to ask you, what are you carrying this morning? What is heavy in your life right now? It could be a fear, it could be a worry. It could be something that's just not quite right in your life. It could be a habit, a relationship that has gone astray. What are you carrying? I want you to store that away. I'm going to come back to this. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he was observing Passover with his disciples. Now, Passover at the time of Jesus was already over 1,000 years old. It was a time to commemorate God's deliverance of his people from slavery in the Empire of Egypt. And the Empire of Egypt is a reflection of all that is wrong with humanity. The worship of things that are not worthy of worship. It's the oppression of other human beings. It's a representative of greed, a sense of scarcity. And so God's judgment on the false gods of Egypt and his deliverance of the people of Israel is commemorated in the practice of Passover. If you have any Jewish friends, you know that Passover was this past week. It's something that is practiced even today. And so as God rescued his people out of slavery, what he did was he enacted 10 plagues in order to judge and show his superiority over the gods of Egypt. And the last plague was the death of the firstborn. And it's harsh. For some of us, it sounds primitive, barbaric. But as we reflect on this ancient practice, what we remember is that God said, "I will pass through the land on a particular night, and I will strike down every firstborn of every family, from livestock to the Hebrews to the Egyptians." But he told his people this. He said, "I want you to take the blood of a lamb or a goat, a year old, without blemish, put it on the doorframe of your house." So this is a picture. I just got back from Mexico, and there was this goat. We can go back to the goat. It could be a goat or a lamb. I guess over the centuries, lambs went out. Maybe they're more cute. But in Exodus chapter 12, God instructs his people to slaughter a lamb or a goat. So this is a goat that I met in Mexico. It was rejected by its mother for some reason. And so in order to keep it alive, there was an intern at the ranch that we stayed at that had to bottle feed it 3 times a day. And so I got close, and it was kind of sad because it kept thinking I was going to feed it, but I really just wanted to take a picture of it so I could put it on the screen. So anyway, so the people of Israel were instructed to slaughter a goat or a lamb and spread some of its blood on the doorframe of its house. And so when God passed through the land that night, he would pass over that house. It was an ancient form of covering or atonement. It was an expression of God's generosity. It's not that the people of Israel were more holy than the Egyptians. It's not that they deserved it or earned it in any way. This was a gift. This was a way that God wanted to show his favor to whoever was listening, whoever wanted to respond. And so year after year, the people of Israel would observe Passover in this way. And once a temple was built in Jerusalem, people would pilgrimage from all over the ancient world in order to slaughter their lambs, offer sacrifices, and celebrate God's deliverance from slavery. And so this is what Jesus was doing with his disciples on the night that he instituted what would become the Eucharist, or communion, or the Last Supper. I want to read from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, and you can just listen. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So Jesus is doing something profound here at this last Passover meal. There's no lamb mentioned, and so Jesus takes it on himself, and he says, "I am your Passover lamb." And as the events unfold, people will begin to realize that this is God's sacrificial lamb, not just for that family, not just for the Jewish people, but for all nations, all ethnicities, to partake of God's generosity, God's forgiveness. And so as we take communion this morning, I want you to think about this. What does it mean that Jesus serves as the Passover lamb to atone for the brokenness of humanity? What does that mean for you? So the way that we're going to take communion is that we're going to come down the center aisles. Pastor Kevin and I will be at the front. Debbie Nishi will be serving in the back. And I think we have someone who can serve you in your seat. So if you just kind of raise your hand and flag them down, they'll come to you. Communion is an ordinance that we observe as followers of Jesus. And so this is something that we as Christians do to remember what God has done for us. So when you're ready, we're going to observe communion to start our time. This is the first of a handful of activities. And over the course of the next few hours, Jesus experiences betrayal, abandonment from his closest of friends, a series of lies and false accusations. He's then publicly humiliated and sentenced to death. I'm going to read from the Gospel of Luke. Would you receive this as a meditation? If you have your Bible, you can follow along. And this narrative comes from Jesus as he's hanging from a Roman cross, an instrument of torture and humiliation. Luke chapter 23, verse 32. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him, which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." rebuked him. "Don't you fear God?" he said. "Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And when he had said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. I want you to imagine yourself present for Jesus' execution. Who might you have been? What would have been your thoughts, perhaps your response as you witnessed this? I'm always struck by this narrative from the Gospel of Luke, particularly that about the thief on the cross. To recognize in that moment who this man next to him was, and to call out for mercy, and then to be received. There's just something profound about that. There was nothing that this criminal did to demonstrate to Jesus that he was sincere. There were no good works. There was no religious activity. He simply called out and said, "Jesus, remember me." And Jesus says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And to be honest, I'm not even sure exactly what that means. I've never died. I don't know what the afterlife looks like. But there's this concrete promise that Jesus offers to this criminal. When it says that the curtain of the temple was torn in two, this is significant. Because up until that point in history, the temple was the most holy place on earth. It's where God chose to be with broken humanity. But it was through a long series of rituals and expectations. The temple in Jerusalem had divisions in order to keep that which was holy and perfect from that which was defiled and unclean. If you were not Jewish, there was a court for you. If you were a woman, there was a place for you. If you were a commoner, there was a place for you. And it was only in the holiest of holies that the high priest got to enter in order to offer sacrifices on behalf of the people on a very particular day in the calendar year. And this curtain that was torn in two, separating the holiest place, God's presence from the rest of the people. It wasn't a curtain that you get at IKEA. It's not like what I would have in my house. This was a 6-inch thick curtain from ceiling to floor. It was torn top to bottom. And it wasn't until years, perhaps generations later, that Christians would begin to recognize and realize, what does this mean? That God's presence is now open to the nations, open to all people. What does it mean that the presence of God no longer dwells in a place, but in people, in broken people, in imperfect communities like this one today? I often ask myself, where is God? I can't see God. I can't touch God, smell God, feel God. But when we read through the gospel narratives, when we read through the New Testament, we see that God chooses to indwell people. And I wrestle with this because people are complicated. Relationships are challenging. And I'm an introvert, so I don't love being around people. But somehow God has chosen to reveal himself through people. And there are miracles that happen in the human heart as God, over our lifetimes, begins to transform who we are, how we see each other, how we see ourselves, how we see God. And sometimes that takes time. I want you to take out your stone. I asked you not too long ago to name what it is that this represents for you today. What are you carrying with you? What is heavy on your soul? It doesn't have to be a personal moral sin. It can be. But oftentimes what weighs us down, it's much more complex than that. Or it feels that way. It could be a fear. It could be something that you're mourning, you're grieving. It could be a relationship that is not quite right. For me, this is bitterness. I have a hard time letting go of certain things when it comes from certain people. And I found a way to be polite, to not mention it, but it sits in my heart. It erodes my soul. And so as we think about the cross, about Jesus paying for the brokenness of humanity, there's an opportunity that we have to lay these things before God, to trust that He brings together the broken parts of our lives. So I'm going to have the choir come up in just a minute, and you're going to have an opportunity to physically lay your stone at the foot of the cross as a symbolic gesture of prayer. You can kneel, you can sit, you can linger up here for a while. Pastor Kevin and I will be out here in the corners if you'd like to receive prayer. But this is your time to meet with God. And I don't know where you're at in your life journey, where you may be at in your faith or your perceived lack thereof, but we're all human, and we all carry stuff with us. And so I invite you, when you're ready, to come forward through the center, and then you can return your seats through the side aisles.
Hebrews 12, 1-2 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings to so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." When you are ready, we invite you to come to the front after the choir and place your stone at the foot of the cross. This is a physical act of prayer. Once you are done, you may return to your seat, or if you wish, feel free to sit or kneel in the front. If you would like to receive prayer, Pastor Nick and Pastor Kevin are available.
life and breath was drained out of him. A man named Joseph, who we don't know a ton about, asked for the body. And so he takes Jesus' body, wraps it in cloth, and lays it in a tomb that presumably he owned. And then came the Sabbath. And for the Jewish people, the Sabbath was absolutely sacred. There was no work to be done. It was a time to rest and be still. And this Saturday, which over the years Christians have termed Holy Saturday or Silent Saturday, is significant for us because it's a time when Jesus' body remained in the tomb. And it raises an interesting question. Why didn't God just raise him immediately? Why does God wait? And some think it's because we live in a Holy Saturday world. We live in a world in between Jesus' first and second coming, between the point of our redemption and our own death, our own meeting God in paradise. And so because of that, we will inevitably experience disappointment, silence, pain. And this is important because this is, in many ways, the way that God meets us, forms us, challenges us. This, in many ways, is what faith is. It's not the lack of faith. That is what faith is. On the third day, and the Jewish people will count portions of days. So Friday was one day, Saturday was two, Sunday was the third day. On the third day, some women who supported Jesus traveled multiple days on foot from the Galilee to be with Jesus, and who were watching at a distance, go to continue the mourning process. They didn't expect to see a party or a resurrected Savior. They expected to find a corpse, and so they brought spices to anoint his body. I'm going to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 20. Now Mary, this is Mary Magdalene, stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this she turned and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. The Gospel of John is the only gospel that records this particular narrative. And I think it's striking because in the ancient world, the testimony of a woman was worthless. It didn't mean anything. And so if these disciples were trying to start a movement, if they were perhaps lying and creating conspiracy theories, there's no way that they would have included this story. And I love the way that it unfolds, that after watching Jesus tortured, his body and his face disfigured, it makes sense that Mary would not recognize him. In fact, in the Gospel of Luke, there's another story of disciples who didn't recognize Jesus in his resurrected form. It took them a long time. And so for Mary to mistake Jesus as the gardener is not completely surprising. And I love the way that Jesus reveals himself to her. He doesn't say, "Hey, here I am." this is who I am, and begin to preach to her. He simply calls her by name. Probably in the same voice that he originally called her. Out of a life, we don't know a ton about her, but we know that she was demon-possessed. Lived in the Galilee, was probably wandering around without any community, without a family. And Jesus called her by name, called her to come be part of his community. And I think the remarkable thing about the good news of Christianity is that God calls us by name. And again, I don't know where you may be at in your spiritual journey, but I want you to consider this. Does God know your name? Does God in the 21st century even speak and reveal himself in such ways? Does God know who you are? Are you in the consciousness of God? Part of what we celebrate today in the resurrection of Christ is the reality that there is a God who has not abandoned his creation, who knows the number of hairs on your head, who knows your pain, who knows what your rocks represented, a God who knows who you are. And that is the invitation that I want to leave you with this morning, wherever you may be at in your journey, that God sees you, that God desires to be in relationship with you, and he's in the process of restoring all things through his body, through his infinite love poured out for you. So we're going to close this time with another song. So actually, if you would stand. If you don't know what worship is, I just want to ask, what do you love? Do you love K-pop? Do you love sports? Do you love your politicians? Do you love yourself? There's something in the human heart that is designed to worship something. And the invitation of the cross is to worship the only one who is worthy of worship. So, would you sing as we celebrate new life in Christ?